let's get started this morning with a brief centering exercise.
And let's just ask everybody to mute themselves, or maybe Kendra can do that from there, so their faces don't pop up on the screen. Okay.
Right, so let's do a centering exercise and bring our attention to the present moment, to where we're at, letting go of any past anxiety, any future anxiety, any senses of fear, upsets. Let's come into that present moment and trust that the peace that we seek is there already, waiting for us to claim it. And let's do that now. Claim the peace within. Amen.
Amen.
So,
today we're on lesson 201, and it's the first lesson in the 6th review. So on page 386 of the 2nd edition, we'll start the 6th review. And I've asked Timothy to kind of take the lead in talking about the review, and then we'll talk about today's lesson.
yeah.
I'll probably interrupt quite a lot.
Oh, of course, that's good. That's what we do. So, yeah, Jan's got a really nice explanation of how she was practicing this lesson and the techniques that she used in that. But let's take a look at this introduction in the workbook. Like you said, it's page 386, review 6. And what I want to note in this introduction is that we're getting ready for part 2 of the workbook. And as we've often said, the workbook's put into 2 parts. There's part 1 and part 2, and we're finishing part 1, and we want to come into part 2. And part 1 was about letting go of how we think now, how we see things now,
Right.
how we're seeing things from fear, from the egos, like becoming aware of that, becoming aware that that's not what we value,
Right.
that it's there because we've given it unconscious value.
And how to make the distinction.
And right, to see that fear is not part of love, to
Yeah.
see suffering and misery is not part of love.
Right.
That idea. So at the beginning of this set of lessons, there was an introduction to this set of lessons, and it was saying that we're not asking for total dedication now, but what we are asking is for you to put in the amount of time that you need to put into these practices so you can change your mind and find that peace inside.
Right.
That's what he's asking now. It's just a function of you training your mind to let go of this past thinking. That's what part 1 is about. And we're getting ready for part 2. And basically, what we're getting ready for is to find this peace inside that path is understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, it's not a peace inside where what I think should happen, happened. It's not the peace inside when I've accomplished a goal. All of those things are a certain kind of peace, but it's not talking about that peace.
It's talking about the kind of peace that you have as part of your being.
That's it.
That you can't leave. It does not leave you.
Right.
And being in touch with that.
Yep. And trusting in faith that it is always there. I mean, that's what this course is claiming. If you can set up the situation so you recognize any suffering, any problem, any conflict, it's just a function of unforgiveness, however much
Right.
You can't see that connection. If on faith, you can say, well, there's an unforgiveness in my mind.
Right.
Let me look at that and let me apply forgiveness, because you say forgiveness
Right.
will end all your suffering. And it doesn't mean the world will change or even maybe your illness changes, but you will be at peace.
Yeah.
That transcends concept.
Right.
That transcends your concept of self or the world or others.
So that idea of peace that passeth understanding, it's like understanding. You have to understand it. It's like, no, this is below that level. This
Right.
is more foundational. It's how we were created.
That's right.
We were created by peace, out of peace, in peace. That's what we are. There's nothing that can hurt us when we remember who we really are.
Right. So that is the process. So here, what we're specifically trying to do in this practice for this review is to practice discernment, and we're going to read that discernment, letting go of everything it says that makes us deaf to reason, sanity, and simple truth.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're doing the course, if you've done it at all and it's working for you, you've come to some conclusion that whatever the situation was, I changed my mind of how I see myself or others, and then I found peace. The situation didn't necessarily change,
Right.
but I changed my mind, and how I see things now has changed.
Right.
So it's trying to get us to use words, to go beyond words and concepts, to get to this state of peace.
So the lessons, or the reviews of the lessons, are really short.
Yeah.
And he's asking us to spend more time wordlessly, more time in quiet, in a kind of prayerful communion. We're training ourselves for that. And for me, I'm a very busy mind. Let me say, the busyness of my mind is often overrunning the truth. Let me put it that way. I am not that. That is something I sometimes listen to, and it's habitual. And so this review and even part 2 have really been less impactful for me in the past than the lessons with all the words, part 1. And because I can chew on the words, but I've learned some things, and I will share some of that later. But it's all about getting quiet and being in the presence of God, having this quiet communion with all of creation and with our Father.
So what he's, one of the lessons in this queue is all things lessons would.
All things are lessons.
All things are lessons God would have me learn. And it says in there, how do we know if we're thinking with the ego or we're thinking with the Holy Spirit? And he said, if pain is real in the perception to you, then you're thinking with the ego. And if you recognize that and say, I will forgive and see this differently,
right,
then I will forgive and this will disappear. So he's saying, use these words and concepts that are in these lessons. It can be what my gratitude I earn. Love is the way I walk in gratitude. I'm not a body. Use these words and concepts to apply to your upset, which is rooted in unforgiveness, whether you see it that way or not. Use these words to bring your awareness to the presence in your mind of that peace that's already there. Like you said, we were created in that peace.
Right.
That peace is still there.
Right.
So we use the words to go beyond, and having both of those is clear because the words in here are powerful. If we assert these words and the truth of them, if I could really say to myself in faith, I'm not a body, I'm free, I'm still as God created me. If I can truly say that, then he's saying that pain and fear will disappear.
Right.
It'll disappear.
Right.
And that's the check we can cash with the Holy Spirit. If it's not disappearing, go to the big guy and say, what's going on? How come this is not disappearing in my mind? What is it that I need to do?
Okay, so I want to talk about 2 things.
All right.
One of them is this might be a good time to talk about forgiveness. So on Friday, I think it was Friday, we had a question. So how do you forgive? Like when the 2 of us have a kerfuffle, how do we forgive? And I think maybe the questioner was wanting to see something happen. So we talked about this, and it's like, in the course, this is not about how we talk to one another with certain frameworks. It's about me looking at my unforgiveness, me looking at my pain and saying, I don't want that. And usually using a lesson or something that I picked up from the text to shift my mind. And you would do the same thing. So it's an internal process. And when the upset is still going on between us, we separate because you can't solve a problem from that perspective. It's just not going to work. I know you know that. It's like when you're upset, you want the other person to talk to you and get it straight, you know, but
So I'm pounding on the door. Jan, we got to deal with this. Jan. We got to deal with
no.
No, we need a little break. She said, no, we got
I just read in New York, I read the New York Times in the morning from New York. And there's this column, Miss Manners, is really, Miss Manners says this and that. But Miss Manners, somebody said, so when my partner wants to keep on talking when he's upset, what do I do? And she said, that was a pretty good idea. She said, just walk away and say, we'll discuss this when you're in a better frame of mind. And I have to say, because it's never just one, right? I mean, if I'm upset, this is where I have to deal with it. I have to say, we'll discuss this when I'm in a better frame of mind, right? Okay, so that's that. So it's like the forgiveness is done with my ego, because my ego has to be recognized as lying to me and choose something else. And the way to make the flip is some of the favorite lessons that you've picked up by doing the practice. You know, every single lesson has a response to temptation. Sometimes it's a little different than the title of the lesson. Most of the time it's the title of the lesson. And so it's like, okay, so I just opened up the book just now. And what came to my visual awareness is I am upset because I see what's not there. That's a perfectly good lesson to use. I'm upset because I'm projecting on you and I'm making something up. Does that thought help me to straighten out my upset, angry thinking? Yes, it does, because it's saying, hey, you're not right. There's something wrong here. You got a screw loose. There are, you know, every lesson, God's will for me is perfect happiness. Am I in perfect happiness now? No. Whose fault is that? It's not God's, not Timothy's, it's mine. Let me do my inner work. So I wanted to make sure we addressed that question. Did I?
No, you did good.
All right.
So let's look at that. What are we actually doing when you and I are saying, you know, what we need to do is back off from this and come inside
Right.
and find the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right? So what are we saying in that situation? So we've talked about this. How do we use money, and how does, what do you think we should do, or what do I think I should do? Or if you're talking to yourself about some sort of situation, like how am I going to get through the pandemic, and will I be enough? All of those.
And what that person did to me,
right.
All
of those preoccupations, it's saying, stop.
Right.
Stop for a minute and ask yourself, how do I feel?
Yeah.
And feelings are much more than just emotions. I mean, emotions are a big part of feeling, but feeling is, how do I see myself?
It's perception as well.
Do I see myself as being pushed around by the world? Do I see myself as under the bondage of somebody else's behavior? Stop that for a minute.
Yeah.
Stop that for a minute and come inside and try to find the division between the situation and your reaction to the situation.
Yeah, that's good.
Because your reaction is what you always have control of.
Right.
And that's where my faith has to be rooted, because it's saying, if I grant mercy to myself, if I'm able to give myself love and forgiveness for holding that upset thought, then it's saying those will be the eyes that I'll see the world.
Right.
If I grant myself mercy, I'll see a world full of mercy.
Yeah.
And that's where my faith has to come in, because what does my inner forgiveness have to do with politics or the world or asteroids coming to the earth?
Yeah.
What is, there's a gap in our cognitive understanding there, but I just have to say, I'm upset.
Yeah, right,
I'm not happy.
right,
Just isolate yourself with that
Right.
situation.
and then know that you can make a change. And this course is loaded with ideas, sentences that you can use to make the shift.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that's what we've been saying is that we're all gonna, some of these things in these lessons are gonna grab me that they're not gonna grab Jan. you
Yeah,
know?
oh yeah.
But everybody has to find what works for them.
And we find it by using the day's lesson when an upset happens. So you'll experience that some of these lessons really work great for you and others, not so much, because we're all different. We were talking about how Timothy and I we approach situations cognitively, emotionally, so differently. And yet we both find solution in the course. So you can too. I think I started by saying there's a couple of things I wanted to say, and I only dealt with one. I forgot. Oh, my friend Hilda, who's in her 80s, told me about this new disease. It's called CRS. Can't remember shit. It's happening.
You're not getting old.
No.
So, when way back when we were doing the course together, my spiritual growth and initiation was different than Jan's, and so different ideas grabbed me.
Yeah.
So the idea I'm not a body, I'm free, that really grabbed a hold of me, and I was trying to share that with Jan, and she's going,
For years it didn't make any sense. I didn't get it.
And I'm going like, but you did this, you gotta get this one, and dropping that requirement that others think like they have to think the way you do,
right,
is huge.
It is.
Right?
It is. Yeah. As Timothy, at the beginning of his, do you mind if I share the story? At the beginning of his spiritual life, it was with Hinduism, Vedanta, and he had after a while, at some point, an initiation from his teacher that, brought him the light, like instant experience of spirit and knowing he wasn't a body. It was just like the transmission that they can do. The course is a much more gentle, easier path to that. And it took me many years to relate to this idea. I am not a body. Now it's like I get it. I really get it.
And he says in 18 Beyond the Body, he says everyone has had some sort of experience of being transported, that there's more going on than the eyes will tell you.
Right.
And it was like a joining with something, a thought or a word or something from the past, but you stopped excluding it and you joined with it.
Right.
So like athletes, they say athletes can get into
the zone. Right.
Yeah, I think you told an experience that George had about somebody fired a gun.
Oh yeah.
And everything slowed down.
Uh-huh. Right? Yeah.
So we've all had these experiences, what the Jungians call a grail experience. We've all had something like that shows us there's more that's going on.
And we have to remember that. We have to hold on to it. That is more real than, your shirt.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what that speaks to is that experience is the real teacher here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get at, and especially here as we move into part 2, is there's this experience of peace that's beyond the words, it's beyond the concept.
Yeah.
And it's ever accessible.
And I just realized one of the reasons, or maybe the reason why I've had trouble with these very short lessons, like part 2 and like the reviews. And it's the first obstacle to peace.
Right.
Desire to get rid of it. Like, keep me busy, 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 busy. And
Well-
Holy Spirit has been using that, and it works fine, but he's asking us now, to the extent that we can, to be okay with an inner quiet, right?
Right, because he's saying in there, these obstacles to peace, he's trying to get us to see what they are, right?
Yeah,
And there's this desire to get rid of peace, but why would we have that desire? Well, he said, if you recognize that fear, what does it say? Attraction of guilt produces fear of love, right? Because love would never look on guilt. So if we're attracted to guilt, in other words, I had to make you responsible for my upset, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to accept, that's what you did,
yeah,
right? If I'm in that situation, you know, I can see that it is my lack of peace
yeah.
that's going on,
And that we want to be upset.
that we want to be
We
upset.
do.
So to notice that in your mind, like you do forgive and you do get peace, but then these thoughts come back up.
Yeah.
He really is a monster. You know, we're never going to get out of the pandemic. This is going to, you know, those thoughts come up,
Blah, blah, blah thoughts.
right? So we're going to cover some of that structure here if we have time. But I think what Jan wants to do is share with you how she is practicing this
Today,
this first lesson, which is
I trust my brothers who are one with me. That's the review, and it's supposed to be wrapped with, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. So Timothy has really been a model for me. I haven't followed it much, but I can see how you memorize the prayers. He memorizes the prayers in the book, and he's got a lot of them, and he really works with them and prays them. And I've memorized a few, and I use them a lot, those few that I've memorized. But I decided I'm going to memorize this one. So today's lesson, the prayer in it, and you always know the prayer because it's in italics. No one but is my brother. I am blessed with oneness with the universe and God, my Father, one creator of the whole, that is myself, forever one with me. So what I did was I put the whole thing, you know, I am not a body, I'm free, the whole thing on the back of a card, and then I put the prayer on the front. And you can see it's all messed up already because I had it in my pocket, took it on a hike, took it out several times, spilled coffee on it, and I'm going to keep this with me today and work with it. And then I realized one of the things that I can do to learn it, this works for me, this is a learning technique that works for me, is I wrote it out. So I repeated it many times, starting with, no one but is my brother. And I had to say to myself, I don't like that language. I'm going to say, everyone is my brother. Okay, after a while, I got into the rhythm of no one but is my brother, and that's okay. But everyone is my brother. That it's okay to change the words. And then I just memorized a little bit of it at a time. And then when I came home, and so I got to where I could pretty much say the prayer without stumbling too much. Then I came home and I started writing it out. And I wrote it out a bunch of times. And each time I wrote it, I tried to write it without looking. Couldn't always. But as I wrote, I had a much deeper relationship with the words. They meant more to me. And at one point, I realized I had left out a word. So I'm going to read this part to you. I am blessed with oneness with the universe and God, my Father, one creator of the whole, that is myself, forever one with me. I left out that one creator. And as I put it back in, I thought, what the heck does that mean? One creator. And then I saw that in context, he was saying, we're one with God, we're one with the creator. We are also a creator. I mean, it took on more meaning. The more I wrote it, the more it sunk in as being really a powerful and beautiful prayer. Whereas when I first read it, it was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I agree with all that. But it turns out that it's really a wonderful prayer. So as I said, I was out on a hike and I got out there at 5:30. There was nobody else there. And I went up to this rock formation, as you know, pretty bigger than a room, you know, about as big as a house. And I was up on that rock. I call that one my office because I go up there to journal, and it's got a beautiful view and all that. So I was there and I was about to leave. I was standing up and I heard these dogs. And what I saw was two really big dogs, one of them an Australian Ridgeback, and his ridge was up. It means the hair on the back of his spine was up.
So as you're telling this dog story, were you holding this?
Yes.
What you memorized?
Yes.
You were holding that in your mind.
The oneness with the universe.
Okay, so
I had already thought about that as I was walking along. Thanks for bringing that up. Like, I'm one with the wild animals here. Wild animals, first thing in the morning, they could be around, like javelinas and coyotes. I really am not afraid of them. But I went into the place of oneness with them.
So what happened with the dogs?
So the dogs were not on a leash, and they came to the base of the rock, and they were like really barking at me. And then they realized I couldn't get up that way. They came around the other way, and the owner was going like, no dogs, no, 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 no. And I stood up, and without any fear or anger, I said, don't you dare. And they were like within a foot of me with their big mouth. They were big dogs, and they were barking and angry. And it was like, I really didn't have any fear. It was like, you dogs, no. And it was like, they backed right off.
You know what's interesting about that is that
I thought it was kind of cute on Valentine's. Yeah, it's all right.
no, it's interesting in the Obstacles of Peace. It talks about you can send out the dogs of fear, or you can send out the love from the Holy Spirit.
Right.
So you had this strength.
It was peace. It wasn't like an oppositional thing.
Right.
It was like, no,
Right.
you know, just like, that's not what's going to happen here, dogs. As if I were their owner, you know?
Right. And what you're saying is you're attributing your strength in that situation because you had this thought very present in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's what each student has to do. Each student has to find the particular ideas and concepts that jazz them at that moment. Because each of us are going to be different in that way.
Right.
So in general, we can say things like find your own words, but each one has to find them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so, so like in this lesson, part of the practice is that we take this idea, we hold it in our mind. I trust my brothers who are one with me. We let go of the past and the future. We come right into the present, it says.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, we want to hold that idea there so we go beyond the words. But when ego thoughts come up,
yeah,
we practice simple reason, simple sanity, and simple truth. This must be unforgiveness in my mind. This threat to me can't be real.
Yeah.
And I have the means. It doesn't mean it can't take my body. It can't do that. But to the truth of who I am, this threat cannot be real.
Right.
And then you had a deep relinquishment of the dog's going to kill me, the dog's going to bite my leg off.
I didn't even go there.
Yeah, you didn't even have to go there,
right? Because
you found what was a deep relinquishment, it says here, of everything that clutters up the mind and makes it deaf to reason, sanity, and simple truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in this practice, You just keep coming back to the lesson, go beyond the words, find the peace. Come back to the lesson, go beyond the words, find the peace. But when the ego thoughts come up, take a look at them clearly and say, is this really what I want? No, I don't like the way I feel. That's
Right.
enough.
That's enough to get you on the path again.
I just
Yep.
don't like the way I feel.
Yep.
And I have the power now,
Mhm.
right, to change how I see things.
Yeah,
And then I'll see through love, I'll see through mercy.
right.
So for the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be taking a look at the review 6 here in the introduction. We're gonna take a look at the idea. We're preparing for part 2. We're gonna take a look at the idea of what does it mean to let go of the way we're thinking now.
Mhm.
All of these things. And he's promising us if we put in this effort, we're gonna have that peace
Right.
more frequently inside.
Yep. And if you want to, you can go back to the original lesson and read it, but
Yeah.
it's not necessary. You know, I trust my brothers who are one with me. It's got a number right in front of it in the review. It'll send you back to where that was originally a 2-page thing.
Yeah.
And you can read it if that helps. If
Well-
that helps to steady your mind. And that's what I used to do.
Yeah. So, or anything, whatever you found in the course, that's what you use. If it's not this lesson, it's something else. Okay, let's do this.
So thank you so much